Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the Harbor Community Meeting for the City of Los Angeles Assessment of Fair Housing. Please note we'll be recording the meeting this evening and possibly sharing the recording on the city's website. We're excited to have you with us tonight, but before we dive in, we have a few housekeeping items to start with. First, we have Spanish interpretation available. Everyone will need to select the language they'd like to hear the meeting in. And you can do that by clicking on the interpretation button on the lower part of your screen and choosing between English and Spanish. We also have a sign language interpreter, and you can choose to see the ASL interpretation using that same interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. Additionally, the meeting will be closed captioned, and anyone wishing to view captions can click on the link in the chat, which will take you to the stream text site with the caption. So I'll pause for people to select those options. And then when you're speaking tonight, we ask that you talk slowly so that our interpreters are able to capture what you're saying. A couple of other notes about how we'll use Zoom. When we have opportunities for questions or discussion, you can use the raise hand button to signal that you would like to speak. Just click on the reactions button at the bottom of the screen and choose the raise hand option. You can control your audio and video using the mute and start video buttons. And you can also share questions or ideas throughout the meeting using the chat feature, but we encourage you to share out loud so our interpreters can capture what you're saying. We'll try to answer your questions during the meeting, but if we're not able to answer you tonight, someone will be in touch with you by email afterward. During the meeting, we'll be using Slido to ask a few questions for you to respond to. So if you'd like to open another browser and go to slido.com, that's SLIDO.com, you'll be ready when we get to those slides. And finally, if you're joining us by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your sound and *9 to raise your hand. And I'll mention these again before we begin our discussion.
Hello, good evening. Nancy Tuamaquaboa. I'm with the Los Angeles Housing Department, also known as LAHD. This project, an assessment of fair housing, or AFH, will analyze the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles, essentially looking at whether all residents are able to access housing that is suitable for them, free from unlawful discrimination. It will also look at whether the areas where people live impact their ability to access different community resources and opportunities. These types of studies are required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for any city or county that receives HUD grants for community development or affordable housing. Additionally, as of 2018, the state of California also requires public agencies, including cities, counties, and housing authorities to prepare fair housing assessments. The City of Los Angeles Housing Department will be leading the development of this study in partnership with the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, also known as HACLA. In addition to myself, we also have other staff here from LAHD who are represented, and I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, Joel Montano with the Los Angeles Housing Department as well. Happy to be here with you all tonight. I will pass it to Maya.
Hello, Maya Abood. I'm a little sick, sorry, but happy to be here with you. I'm also with the policy unit in the Housing Department.
Thank you, Joel and Maya. And we also have staff from HACLA, so please go ahead and introduce yourselves. I believe we have Jose Gutierrez here. And then also should be joined by Patricia Mendoza as well. LHD and HACLA are working with Mosaic Community Planning, a consultant firm, to assist us in the research and development of the city's study. Members of Mosaic's team are here, and I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
I'm Jessica Fish with Mosaic.
I'm Melissa Mayu, also with Mosaic, and happy to be here tonight. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Heaven Silva, also with Mosaic.
Thank you. If you would like to contact any of the team about the AFH, you can email lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. This email address will be placed in the chat box for reference. You can also send a message there if you have additional input after tonight or would like to be added to an email list for updates about this project. Thank you.
One of the most important aspects of the AFH is hearing from local residents and other stakeholders about the needs you see related to fair housing and access to opportunity in LA. Having an on-the-ground perspective from many people living and working in the city every day is crucial. We'll give an overview of fair housing and the AFH process so everyone has an understanding of the topics we'll be talking about, but most of the meeting time will be a chance for us to really hear from you. Your input will help identify priority fair housing issues and their causes. It will also shape the goals and strategies that city and HACLA leaders adopt. So it's very important that we hear your perspectives, and we'll talk more about the ways you can stay involved with the project at the end of the meeting. So to get started tonight, we'd like to hear what you like best about your neighborhood. You can share your ideas by going to slido.com, it's SLIDO.com, and entering code 120 or using the QR code here. Just let us know what things you like best about where you live, and you can enter more than one answer if you would like. Okay, so we see diversity of the neighborhood coming up. Quiet neighborhood.
And if you're not able to get to slido.com and want to leave something in the chat or share something out loud, that's great too.
And my neighbors as well. Yeah, and while we're working on the Slido poll, would anyone like to share out loud what your neighborhood is and what you like best about it, or just elaborate on what you wrote? Location of the neighborhood. Are there improvements you'd like to see where you live?
Maybe for the person that mentioned location, are there particular things that are near you where you live that you really value that you might want to share? Looks like we still have a couple people typing.
Okay. Schools and parks are near where you live. That's great. Markets. Okay, great. Freeways. Event venues.
Great. Yeah, and I think so. We have a lot of staff on the meeting and a few community members. So definitely feel free to unmute and share your ideas out loud if you'd like to. We'd like to have kind of a conversation throughout the meeting. So please don't be shy. Let's see. Looks like we might have everyone's response in. So,
Okay, great.
oh, there we go. Small businesses.
Small businesses, good. Yeah, would anyone like to share out loud about anything that you wrote or any amenities or resources that you have access to in your neighborhood that you really appreciate? Any improvements that you'd like to see in your neighborhood?
Hi, my name's Lori Jacobs, and I'm in Northwest San Pedro area. And there is a fair amount of new housing being built. However, we're kind of like a peninsula over here, and we have extreme traffic problems. And so with a lot of the new housing going in, they're not including much in the way of parking because they're trying to jam as many units in as they can. And with us having traffic issues, and in fact, they've just reduced the amount of buses that we have down here. So those are huge problems. You can't continue to add more housing and then have less parking and streets to get in and out of.
Okay, thank you, Lori. So issues with access to transportation, traffic, issues with new housing. Would anyone else like to share about this question? Is anybody who's seeing kind of similar issues or other improvements you like to see in your neighborhood, other amenities that you appreciate?
Hi, this is Arceli. Some of the best things about my neighborhood is the small businesses. I really appreciate the moms and pops businesses like coffee shops or just any of those businesses. I very pro supporting small businesses. Some of the challenges that's anywhere around LA County, the increase of just homelessness. And I know I've seen an increase in the past 2 years. I live in Granada Hills. So I've seen an increase, like tents, around like Target or just like a little bit more of the large businesses. And so that I've seen that definitely like from 2 years to now. So obviously like maybe like just the housing situation has been affecting a lot of individuals.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, so access to a bunch of small businesses and then issues of increasing homelessness and maybe related to just costs and availability of housing as well. Would anyone else like to share before we continue with the presentation? Anything else you'd like to share about your neighborhood? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for all of that input. We know that having access to resources and a safe, clean environment is an important aspect of fair housing, and it's one we'll talk more about tonight. So now we'll have a brief overview about fair housing law and then some more discussion. So generally, when we talk about fair housing, we're talking about everyone's right to participate in the housing market, to own, sell, purchase, or rent housing of their choice without fear of unlawful discrimination. So that includes things like renting or buying a home, obtaining homeowners or renters insurance, having access to housing loans, and having fair property appraisals. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, everyone is protected from housing discrimination based on race or ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, and disability. So we refer to these as protected classes because people are protected from housing discrimination based on these characteristics or classes. Along with the Fair Housing Act, many states have additional protections. So the state of California has a series of laws that expand fair housing protections to include several more protected classes, which you see listed here. And they include marital status, age, ancestry, immigration status, language, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, veteran or military status, occupation, and other arbitrary factors. The state also protects people from discrimination based on their source of income, which includes the use of Section 8 housing choice vouchers or other similar types of housing assistance. So as you can see, you have considerable additional fair housing protections under California laws. And here we have a few examples of actions that would be considered illegal discrimination if they're based on protected class. So examples include telling someone that a house is not available for rent or sale when it really is, or denying mortgage loan applications based on protected class. Landlords or lenders cannot apply different terms to a lease or loan based on protected characteristics. So for example, a landlord could not charge a higher security deposit or higher rent to a family with children than to a household without kids. A property manager also couldn't steer families with children to one part of an apartment development. And real estate agents cannot steer home buyers or limit showings to certain neighborhoods based on protected class. Refusing to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities and refusing to accept Section 8 housing choice vouchers are also examples of discrimination that you might see in your community. So while this is not a complete list of ways housing discrimination is present, it illustrates some of the ways it may happen beyond refusing to rent or sell a house to someone. In 2015, HUD adopted a new fair housing rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or AFFH, that called on cities to take a more critical look at the role of housing in their communities. The AFFH rule requires cities to look at access to community resources and opportunities, things like good schools, good jobs, transit, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and a clean environment. Cities need to consider whether everyone has equal access to neighborhoods with these types of amenities, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or any other protected class. The AFFH rule also requires cities to take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and to create communities that are inclusive for everyone. Cities must work to reduce affordable housing needs and other barriers that limit access, opportunities, and resources. As Nancy mentioned earlier, the state of California has its own Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing law, which requires all cities and counties to assess fair housing as part of their housing elements. So this is a requirement at both the federal and state level. So thinking about topics like this, fair housing, affordable housing, or being able to access resources in your community, what types of needs do you see in your community? Is there enough housing for seniors, large families, people with disabilities or people with low incomes? Are people able to access housing fairly? And again, you can share your ideas at slido.com using the code 120 or with the QR code here. So we'll have another word cloud. So what fair or affordable housing needs do you see in your community? Okay, so we have need more senior housing and a higher percentage of low income units in all new construction. Okay. Lack of affordable housing. More ADA units available, and another mention of lack of affordable housing. And while we're kind of populating the word cloud, again, more ADUs and financial assistance to build ADUs. Okay, great. So accessory dwelling units. Would anyone like to speak out loud to some of the needs that you noted, or elaborate some on what you're seeing in your community?
Hi, sorry, I'm a little bit sick too. You talked about laws against discrimination, yet it's very hard to prove some of the discrimination that continues to happen, especially with landlords trying to avoid accepting housing vouchers. And also the housing voucher process has some very serious inherent problems, that it takes too long to get application fees and security deposits. So people with vouchers are behind the 8 ball and even trying to get in a unit, because the landlord's always going to take the person who has the security deposit first. This is a big bureaucratic problem. And also sometimes the housing authority is taking too long to inspect a unit for somebody to be able to go in with a voucher.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Okay, so landlords accepting vouchers, and then being able to actually use a voucher. So
and just the whole discrimination, there's a huge problem of discriminating based on credit reports. When credit reports also inherently have severe problems, they're not accurately reported. And in the credit reports, past rental payment and utility payments are not included in those rent reports. So somebody could have paid a credit card late, but they always paid their rent on time, and now their credit rating is lowered. And I don't know why you need a high credit score anyway if you have a voucher, but these are huge barriers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, discrimination based on credit scores and not really take into account people have paid their rent in the past.
Yeah, hi. Lori was very spot on. And what we also see a lot of too is, you know, I've seen people and clients who have applied for units, and they go to maybe a building to apply, and you know, they are accepting a lot of applications just to get those fees when they know that they're not going to accept the client in the first place, or that they're going to use some other reason that they, you know, to rent to someone else. But they are, we've had instances where a few clients have applied at the same building, and they just, even though they may have already offered it to someone, they're continuing to just kind of take the fees from people, even though they know they're not going to rent to them.
Thank you. Okay, so issues with applications continuing to accept fees, but not really expecting to take the person.
Right.
I
and
hear that, but Ella, actually, from what I've talked to property management companies, they don't really make a profit off the application fee, the landlords themselves. They usually just charge whatever they have to pay. However, what is a problem is that somebody has to keep paying an application fee at every single unit they apply for. Wouldn't it be great if there was a central point and you could pay that application fee and it would at least be applicable for 30 to 60 days for all units that they go to?
Absolutely, and then they could just show that they've already paid, they could show, hey, I have one on file already, and I have until at least the next 30 days to try to, apply. That you're right. It would be great, because a lot of times, paying $45, $50 an application, a lot of our clients, if they're on general relief or very limited benefits, it's very hard, or they're trying to go someplace and apply for a waiver to afford that. It really does increase the barriers to housing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the need for kind of a centralized application fee, or just a centralized application that people can use for housing.
A standardized form, and some landlords ask for different information, but a standardized form in some type of database, so landlords could all access that same application.
Thank you. We have another note about very few senior housing existing. The new buildings that do exist have the rent is sky high and not affordable to many people. The building might have 20 units and only make 3 units affordable. Again, rent is too high. Need for more monitoring for landlords so it's equitable and fair.
LA City, I believe, has certain laws on how many units they have to make available for affordable. So I'm hoping with the installation of a new mayor this week that she'll take a look at that and maybe raise that that level.
What about any housing needs related to for sale housing? Do you see any fair or affordable housing issues in that realm?
I couldn't answer that because everything that I deal with is helping people who are unhoused or preventative about to be unhoused. I'm not dealing with anybody so much buying a home. That hasn't been as big an issue.
Okay.
I mean, I can speak from friends and families, that I work with or known that, they're unable to purchase their first home. It just seems like, again, like the mortgages are too high, the loan situation, they don't get approved. It's just very hard for first time buyers to even consider just having a home or owning a home because of the loan situation, and also just mortgage is very high. Even having 2 incomes coming in is still not enough. I have friends that just rented a home, and again, there's 2 incomes there, and they were going to different rental homes, and she mentioned that there was like 20 people like looking at the same house, and they will go to another home, and sometimes they will run into the same people they were in the other house. So it's like the same people trying to like look at the same rental home, and now she's paying like for like over $3,000 for a rental home of like 2 bedrooms. So it's really high too. So it's not affordable even for middle class.
Okay. And sounds like lots of competition for the housing that is available.
We have on the slide, incentivize people with homes to rent out rooms. Home sharing programs are needed. In Inglewood, the homes have skyrocketed in pricing. They're going for $1 million. It's very hard to get a loan for that much. So affordability issues with both home ownership and renting. Kind of need for programs to just expand rental options or income options for homeowners as well for home sharing. Any other thoughts on this question? I see someone's typing.
Maybe another follow-up question, kind of connecting this one with what we talked about previously. For folks who are, eventually able to find a place that's affordable, or at least that they're able to rent, does that tend to be in neighborhoods that have pretty good access to some of those opportunities we were talking about earlier? How does that look kind of geographically in terms of access to resources and opportunities? Maybe no takers on that one.
Are you able to repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. So thinking about places where folks are eventually able to find a place to rent, are those usually in neighborhoods that have pretty good access to different types of opportunities? So like things like we were talking about small businesses or markets, transportation. Is there housing that's affordable in neighborhoods with some good resources?
Melissa, I'll jump in on that one. We need more workforce housing so that you can develop housing where people work near there. So then you get less commuters on the road. For instance, if you took an area and you said, okay, this new development is going to be for people in education, teachers, anybody who works at the school. So if it's a particular city, they're going to be nearby. They're teaching in their neighborhood, so they understand the needs of the students there. You have fewer cars on the road, but I'm not hearing much about anybody developing this type of concept.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. If there's no other input on this one, maybe we can continue with the presentation. But any last comments people would want to share here? All right.
All right, so we'll talk a bit now about what the study we're working on will look like. The assessment of fair housing is an analysis of the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles and a plan for how to expand fair housing through 2028. Under the federal AFH rule, all HUD grantees are required to complete a fair housing study every 5 years, demonstrating how they will affirmatively further fair housing, including actionable strategies for improving housing access and reducing barriers to opportunity. The AFH will include a variety of components, so we'll be looking at demographics and patterns related to residential segregation, integration, and income. We'll identify areas of the city with high levels of racial segregation, including those with high levels of poverty and affluence. We'll look at access to opportunities like schools, jobs, transit, and a clean environment, and whether everyone throughout the city has fair access to these types of resources. We'll consider housing costs and whether affordable housing need varies by protected class. We'll also look at public housing, tax credit developments, and other types of affordable housing, what is available and in what parts of the city. The AFH will include a focus on disability that considers whether people with all types of disabilities are able to find suitable housing in an area they choose. And finally, the study will include an overview of fair housing resources and activities provided by the City Housing Authority and other partner agencies. And community input, including the input that we get from you tonight, will help inform all aspects of the study. The City of LA recently prepared an assessment of fair housing for its 2021 to 2029 housing element that illustrates some of the things that will be in this AFH as well. For example, the city looked at housing affordability by race and ethnicity, and the chart here shows what share of renters spend more than 1/2 of their income on housing, what we refer to as having a severe cost burden. About 37% of Black and 33% of Latinx renters spend more than 1/2 of their income on housing, compared to about 28% for white renters and 26% for Asian renters. So we can see that the ability to afford housing varies by race and ethnicity in LA, which is a fair housing issue that the AFH now underway will explore. Based on all the research, data collection, previous studies, and community input, the assessment of fair housing will identify fair housing issues in the city. For each issue, we'll outline the most significant causes and develop a series of goals and strategies to address them. The strategies need to be meaningful steps toward reducing fair housing issues. And every year, HUD will ask the city to report what achievements it has made toward meeting its fair housing goals. In addition to meeting state and federal requirements, the AFH will be very important as local leaders make decisions about housing policies and resources. It will be built on community input, and it's one way residents can voice their opinions to city and HACLA leadership. The study will advance past fair housing efforts, and including the city's housing element and its previous assessment of fair housing from 2018. Ultimately, what will come out of the plan is an action-oriented strategy that can impact the city's decisions about how to spend the grant funds it receives for housing, community development, and homelessness. The strategies will also shape projects, programs, or policies by the city or HACLA. The final plan will be adopted by the City Council and HACLA leadership, and it represents a commitment by the city and HACLA to implement activities that expand fair housing and stop future housing discrimination for all residents. So I'd like to share a few examples of current fair housing efforts underway by the City of LA and its partners. Stay Housed LA helps prevent eviction through outreach to landlords and tenants and legal assistance to renters facing eviction. It's a collaboration between the city, Los Angeles County, and local legal service providers that began during the pandemic, and responds to the need for tenant protection, which was one of the contributing factors identified in the 2018 AFH and the city's housing element. Another approach designed to improve fair housing for renters is the city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance. The law prohibits landlords from harassing tenants by removing housing services, ignoring repair requests, refusing to accept rent, or doing other things that interfere with a tenant's ability to enjoy their home in peace. The ordinance was one strategy outlined in the city's 2018 AFH to respond to displacement pressure and the lack of affordable housing. The housing element identifies education about the anti-harassment ordinance as a goal, and that outreach is currently underway by the city and its partners. You can see from this outline that we'll have many opportunities for public input during the AFH process. That includes this meeting and other similar community meetings we'll hold this month, along with a series of stakeholder meetings and focus groups in January. We also have a survey open, and we hope everyone will participate in it. and we'll have a link to that later in the meeting. In the spring, we'll want to hear from the community again to get feedback on the draft fair housing issues and strategies to address them. By the summer, we anticipate having a complete draft assessment of fair housing for the public to review. We'll then make any final revisions to prepare for an August approval by City Council and HACLA. So at this point, I'd like to pause and take any questions so far. If you have a question, you can just say it now. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. You can
Hi.
also put questions in the chat.
It's Lori again. The Stay Housed LA, I understand what it's designed to do, but feedback I'm getting is they are understaffed, and the legal resources that they refer people to, such as like inner city law, they're understaffed, and we're about to hit an end on the renters eviction moratorium, and projections are pretty scary that we're going to see a huge increase. So I'm hoping somebody's looking at this and increasing the amount of staff at Stay Housed LA. I know of somebody that was told, oh, we're short on lawyers, you need to go to the courthouse for somebody who got an eviction notice and file something yourself. So and the other thing is, how do you get the information on these resources to the people who really need it? Quite often they're not people who are online. And so I know the California Policy Lab, I think out of UCLA, was trying to find ways to proactively identify people, whether they're on welfare or something else, to try and get notices mailed to them, because the people who need this the most don't even know about this resource.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, so understaffing of some resources, such as the Stay Housed LA program, and making sure that people who need resources are getting information about them.
Yeah, Stay Housed LA is the central point for all of these. They refer people to the other legal entities. Okay, so they really need more staffing.
Okay, thank you. And I saw Nancy unmuted as well.
Yes, thank you, Lori, for that feedback. That's good feedback that we'll share with staff and also those who are actually implementing the program, because it is key. That's a key part of the program is outreach. The outreach is essential because it's also to help help with the prevention of evictions and also just to educate folks. So if that piece is not strong enough and it's not getting to the people who really need to know that the program exists and resources exist, then that's definitely something that is lacking and needs to be addressed. There are additional resources coming to the city, particularly to the housing department that's leading the administration of the program. Based off of what this recent election, voters have approved a ballot measure, United to House LA, which is going to be something that's going to offer a lot of different resources to our department, and particularly to help further enhance our Stay Housed program. So our program in which provides additional tenant protections, legal services. So there will be more opportunities for to increase staffing with the additional resources that are coming. In terms of how much time that would take, that's it will take some time to ramp up. However, there will be additional resources to hopefully address the concerns that you've raised, because absolutely the need is there, and it's going to be more so of a need once the eviction moratorium actually is lifted. So
Nancy, are you referring to the ULA bill that just passed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you for your comments.
Okay, thanks for that information, Nancy. Any other questions before we move on with some more questions for you all?
I'll just note that in the chat, Ella shared that yes, inner city law and neighborhood legal services have an extensive wait list. So sounds like some agreement with what Lori was mentioning.
Okay, thank you both. If there are no other questions, and feel free to continue posting any questions that you have in the chat as well. We will move on with some more questions for you all. So we talked a bit about Stay House LA and the anti-harassment law that help protect renters. But we'd like to hear if there are other agencies or services you know about in the city of Los Angeles that help protect people's housing rights or provide fair housing education, or somewhere you might go if you had a housing discrimination complaint. So what types of resources like that are here in the city? And again, you can share your ideas at slido.com using the code 120 or with the QR code here. Other agencies or services that you know about that help protect people's housing rights or provide fair housing education, or where people might go if they had a housing discrimination complaint. What else is out there? Okay, the Housing Rights Center. And I don't know if you'd like to say more about that. Feel free to unmute if you'd like to expand on that.
Sure. I actually just emailed this organization because I found them. They're a national nonprofit organization that's supposed to be dedicated to fighting housing discrimination. So I sent an email out to their general number to see if somebody could come speak to our organization so we could learn more about that. And also LA County has the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Their rent stabilization programs are supposed to offer housing and tenant protections.
Great, thanks, Lori. Appreciate that. Do you think your neighbors in LA generally know about these types of services that are available?
Absolutely not. They do not. I happen to be on a LA City Neighborhood Council as a homelessness liaison. And so we've been talking about how do we get this out? We just put out a newsletter to our stakeholders, but that's like 12,000 people. Okay. And so this is certainly a quandary. How do you get it to the people who need it the most? And I don't know what kind of advertising the Housing Rights Centers does. I just kind of learned about them recently.
Can you think of ways the city or housing authority could improve how they let people know about the resources and services available?
Well, I guess a mailers is the best way if people aren't online. A mailer's, I know expensive, but maybe they can tie it into something else. There should be one whole mailer that's on all eviction and tenant rights and resources, and include phone numbers so that people don't, if they don't have a computer, they have a way of contacting people. That would be my suggestion.
Great, thank you. Okay, mailers. Would anyone else like to speak to ideas about how to best inform people of the resources and services available?
Yes, I think making connections with the school districts, because there's parent centers at schools, and those can be utilized to share information with parents, or just bringing in, posters or just speakers. I think that's a great idea, connecting with the school districts.
Okay, thank you. And we have a note from Patty in the chat. Melissa, can you read that?
She said that HACLA provides information regarding fair housing services as part of its voucher briefing sessions.
I'm just curious if anyone knows about the city's fairly new department, the Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department. That department actually now has a unit that's investigates complaints about discrimination by employers, landlords, and businesses. So that is a department that is growing in the city and was established, I want to say, a couple of years ago. So that is another resource that we have in the city. So not sure how many people know about that department as well.
Thanks, Nancy. Okay, anything else anyone would like to share about resources and services that are available, or improving people's access to information about them? You can always share in the chat as well. Oh, go ahead.
What about billboards? With, I mean, some, I don't know, because you don't want people reading things while they're driving. But besides mailers, you know, having flyers available at city offices, libraries, places where people might congregate.
Great, thank you. Okay, billboards and information at libraries, community places, and mailers as well.
I've seen two advertisements like at bus shelters. So a place where people, you know, as you're waiting, you could see that information.
All right.
Yeah, I'll hop ahead. Oh, sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to read another note from Patty in the chat that HACLA's lobbies at all of their sites also have flyers from DFEH.
Okay. Great, thanks. Okay, so we have a couple more questions for you all with the remainder of the time that we have. And the first one is, are you aware of any housing discrimination that happens in your neighborhood or in the city of LA? Is that something you hear about or experience yourself? What does that look like?
I think you've already covered some of those topics. Credit ratings, background checks, criminal records, ageism, people with vouchers. Obviously, race becomes an issue, sometimes sexual orientation. But I think the voucher is a huge one. The discrimination right now. We have access to these HUD emergency housing vouchers that have a sunset date next year, and we're going to lose them because of all these barriers preventing people from getting matched up with housing.
Thank you. Oh, what do you think the city or housing authority could do to address or reduce discrimination?
That's a really good question, but it's hard to, there's so many unhoused people and so many, well, it's weird is I think there's more vacancies out there that are available to people. I don't really quite understand it. I think, and I'm just generalizing, that there are some foreign investors who buy apartment buildings and don't really rent them all out. You know, try to turn them into Airbnbs. We should reduce the number of those. I think that's a severe problem, but it's, you know, then you'd be discriminating against foreign investors. I don't really know the answers. These are all really good questions. And again, you can't, it's very hard to prove discrimination. As an older adult looking for a job, I know I was discriminated because of my age, but you couldn't prove it.
Mhm.
So some of them are blatant, but most of them are not.
I agree with Lori regarding how there is kind of a discrepancy between this high volume of investors versus low inventory. It's kind of doesn't really add up. And, you know, so I'm not sure how we can reduce that discrepancy.
Maybe the new ULA bill where they're going to have heavier taxes on multi-unit buildings. I don't know, the one that Nancy was talking about. Nancy, do you think that would affect some of the investors?
No, it's really gonna be more so of a tax on, you know, investments that are at, what is it, 500 million, correct me if I'm wrong. So it's a tax on a certain, at a certain amount of the actual investment amount. So I don't think it will.
And my fear there with the ULA is those investors may pass on that tax that they're now having to pay to the renters. That's why I had concerns with that bill in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the monitoring, somehow we can monitor. I mean, I don't know how much monitoring we can do just to ensure there's more fair housing, that it's more equitable, that it's more accessible. I know, I think Lori had brought it up before, like some sort of a centralized system, but I mean, I don't know how much control we have over that.
You know, one area I forgot to mention are mobile home parks. For some reason, the state came up with rent stabilization that left out mobile home parks. And in an area near me, mostly it's a senior mobile home park with people on fixed incomes. And there was no rent stabilization. So now, again, you have a problem with older adults in danger of losing their homes.
Okay, yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
So it sounds like some of what both of you are talking about is maybe improved enforcement of existing laws, particularly around being able to use housing choice vouchers, but also other types of housing discrimination as well. So maybe testing and enforcement related to
You're right, enforcement, but we don't even have enough staff everywhere for everything else. So that just adds to staff, but it needs to, I think you're right on with that, Melissa. It needs to be addressed.
And Nancy shared us some more specific information about the taxes related to the ULA measure in the chat too.
Yeah, I'll read it out loud. So the measure is a tax, because I want to make sure that's clear. Is a tax. It's a 4% tax on property sold or transferred for more than $5 million, and a 5.5% tax on property sold or transferred for more than $10 million.
Okay.
Well, I'm
And
all
so-
for taxing the rich, okay, but you know, to divvy things up. But again, if these are foreign investors, quite often that extra tax is no big deal. And if they're buying these properties to rent them out, they're going to add that extra money that they had to pay. They're going to build it into the rental costs.
Thanks, Lori. And thank you too for bringing up kind of housing issues related to Airbnb and short-term rentals. I think that's a good, does have fair housing implications and a good thing to keep in mind for this study.
Anything else on housing discrimination before we move on to the next question? All right. If you could live somewhere else in Los Angeles, where would it be and why? And would there be any barriers to moving to that area? Things like maybe housing prices, transportation, distance to work or friends and family, things like that. Where, if you could live somewhere else, where would it be and why? And what would the barriers be? Also, if you would choose to stay where you live, talk about that as well.
I think too, this might not necessarily be yourself, for maybe moving yourself, but if there are like clients that you work with or folks that you work with that you see wanting to move to certain neighborhoods, but having some difficulty accessing because of different barriers.
I understand the question. It's a good question. So people want to improve the neighborhood they're living in, and if they can only afford to live in an area where it's high crime, high gang action, drug action, people want to get away from that, but they can't afford to. So I would say people want to move to a neighborhood that has less crime.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, sort of?
I think so, yes. And the barrier there might be cost.
And I think also to add to that, I mean, we've seen it. A lot of people are leaving California to other states just because of the tax and just the price on just rentals and just being able to buy a home somewhere else where it's cheaper. So those are factors that people might take into account.
All right, so local prices, but issues related at the state level as well.
I'll just
I
note,
just want to say, with this work, the assessment of fair housing, it's simply that in terms of being able to speak to, having opportunities for families to be able to move to neighborhoods that have more amenities, that have more certain things such as parks and great schools, and access to transportation, and low crime and things that you all have mentioned. That is the idea in terms of being able to have that, provide that access so people can be able to move into higher opportunity areas, particularly even those who are voucher holders. But then also for those who want to remain in place where they're at in their neighborhoods that they've been in for years, they've grown up in, or they have family and they're rooted there, to also be able to have access to those things as well, those various amenities in their neighborhoods, and where they're connected, they culturally connected, and where they've been just for years, and that's where they want to continue to remain. So having the option to remain where they're at with the amenities and ensuring that those amenities are there, but then also if they do want to be able to move elsewhere, being able to have that mobility to do so. And that is that is part of a key part of the AFH work, is really speaking to that in terms of how do we develop that, what are the things that need to be put into place, what changes need to be made to be able to allow that to residents. And I know, with different things that are being made available in terms of certain financial resources and things that are not long-term, perhaps like, you know, what's HACLA is providing now in terms of certain vouchers, emergency housing vouchers and other things. It can open up doors for that. However, I know there needs to be more of that in terms of having things that are actually long-term and have more financial resources going in that way to really be able to allow those options for households. And that's key. Again, it's a matter of not requiring people to have to move to be able to get access to certain amenities, but being able to have the option to do so if they need to. If not, still being able to have those you know, great amenities where they live now.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of recap of what this work is going to be about. I'll just note that Patty shared in the chat a list of different types of information that they provide to all their voucher holders. So things that related to reasonable accommodations, what to do if you're a victim of housing discrimination, fact sheets about source of income protection, information related to if you're a victim of domestic violence or dating violence. So that's in the chat if anyone would like to take a look at that.
One category we didn't mention is undocumented people, and they're afraid to use those resources that she listed with HACLA. And so I don't know how prevalent this is, but I imagine it's fairly prevalent, and landlords will take advantage of people in an undocumented status. Is that something that's on your list?
I think that's a great input to have, that is, yeah, definitely a group that is vulnerable to housing discrimination.
These people were afraid to even answer the census, get alone try and reach out to government resources. I'm sure they have a great fear of anything that's related to something that's government.
Sure, and like you mentioned, kind of becomes a situation that's ripe for landlords to be able to take advantage of that. Maybe we'll have some time tonight. If there's anything else that you came to the meeting that you were hoping to be able to share related to housing or fair housing, please feel free to share that now. I think we can have kind of an open discussion.
Okay, I'll bring up something since I'm such a chatterbox tonight. So people with vouchers quite often have had some difficult situations. And with the voucher, quite often comes case management. They have somebody who's helping them along. They've been unhoused. It's not that easy for them to adjust all of a sudden after living in a tent for 3 years or whatever to adjust to this. But we have a huge turnover and shortage of mental health workers, service provider outreach teams. And so I think there are some landlords that may be kind of aware of this, and that might add to their hesitancy in accepting a voucher person if they don't think they're going to have good follow-up case management to keep the person on track. That is a huge issue. I don't know how the city can address it, but the salary levels of these people, the outreach teams, is too low. And that's why they have, and also very stressful. And so that creates this high turnover. So I don't know what category that would fit in, but it does play into one of the reasons that landlords kind of have a stigma or hesitancy in accepting somebody with a voucher.
Yeah, I do think that that's an important kind of piece of information for us to have as we're looking at ways to address discrimination against voucher holders, that this might be something that's playing into that.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up question, Lori. I'm sorry. You're saying in terms of undocumented individuals, landlord, that being an additional reason for landlords to possibly deny voucher holders?
That's a different topic. I mentioned that earlier, that undocumented is a reason that people who are undocumented sometimes are hesitant to reach out to HACLA or some of the resources available to them because they're afraid they'll get turned in. What I was talking about just now is that landlords just accepting somebody with a housing voucher knows that if it's somebody who's been on the streets for a long time, they need help. They can't just be put in an apartment and they adjust real well. But with the turnover of case managers, they don't always get that continuum of care that's needed.
I see. All right, because there's additional services that are needed. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, there are certain cases where there are particular nonprofit agencies that will work with the landlord as far as to try to negotiate housing for an individual by being able to also say there will be case management services provided, and this individual, if housed, would receive those services through that nonprofit organization or through the assistance of that nonprofit organization to try to help, encourage or to negotiate housing for that individual with the landlord. So you do have that happening in some cases, and then also in what's called master leasing.
Right.
That's happening. And so you have, a few units in different buildings that are occupied by individuals who are receiving services. And they're, even the agency may even be the third party that's paying, helping, providing paying the rent to the landlord for that individual, just to ensure there's that stability, and to assist that individual as much as possible. But that is something that is done as well to to really kind of also just let the landlord know, or to demonstrate there's going to be those wraparound services provided, for an individual who needs it, and and to also just to be able to have, again, a few of those units in a particular property available to individuals who may, have special needs, or just, need additional assistance while being housed.
Well, Nancy, those are the intentions. Okay. And there's so many great people out there helping. Okay. Those are intentions. And I mean, I've worked with Catholic Charities, and they do a lot of that wraparound service when they help to get somebody housed. But even there, it's not that they're failing, it's that there's such a turnover of case managers. And believe me, it took a long time for each case manager to even build trust for that person with the voucher to even believe them. And
Right.
So they have to start all over again. So where the fault is they're not paying people enough to do the wraparound services. That's where the problem is. There's amazing people out there. This is not a criticism of the people who are doing this work out there, but they need a prevailing wage to live too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that is the key part in terms of providing assistance, is those who are providing assistance themselves need to ensure that, they have particular resources in place, and to really be able to retain the staff. And that is an issue that's happening with certain nonprofit organizations and those providing services. So we are seeing that happen.
I was just gonna say, I know we have a few people in the meeting that haven't had a chance to share anything. So certainly, if there's anything that you'd like to share either out loud or in the chat, please do leave that information for us, because we want to have it so that we can get your input for the reports. And we definitely thank you for kind of what you provided in the polls as well. Did anyone else that wanted to share anything?
And going back to what Lori mentioned regarding just the wages and workforce, I mean, and these case managers not getting paid, I feel that's another discrepancy, because if you think about, like, let's say Target or you know, people working there, how much they start off. Sometimes they start off at $23, and sometimes are the case managers or anybody that kind of works in the wraparound system of just supporting these families don't get paid that much. So how can we close the gap in wages, or just, you know what I mean? Like being able to also be fair in that sense, like, you know, just comparing just the corporation wages versus what our social, what we're paying our case managers in the kind of in that department.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense and sounds like some agreement with what Lori was saying. Well, Jessica, I'll move us back into the presentation then. It sounds like we got some great input during that discussion.
Oh yeah, we do appreciate everyone providing your thoughts and ideas about housing and neighborhoods in the city. And your input will truly make the study stronger and communicate to city and housing authority leaders what priorities and strategies Los Angeles should focus on for the next several years. Over the next couple weeks, we'll be updating the city's AFH website. It's housing.lacity.org/residents/assessment of fair housing to include summaries about what we heard from you tonight and the other community meetings as well. So if you'd like to see what your fellow Angelenos shared, please check that out. You can also continue to participate in meetings over the next few weeks. So we encourage you to invite friends, colleagues, or neighbors to join you, and you can register for meetings at the city's AFH website or using the QR code that you see on your screen now. And the more people that participate in the project, the better. So we really hope you'll help us spread the word about it. And you can also take a fair housing survey on the project website. There's one for the general public and a second survey if you are a representative of an organization engaged in housing or social services. And as I mentioned earlier, to get updates about the project and future opportunities to participate, just please send us an email at lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org, and we'll add you to the mailing list. You can also drop your name and email address in the chat now.
Again, we'd like to thank everyone so much for your time and the ideas and thoughts that you provided tonight. Your voice is helping to make this a stronger study that will shape for housing access in the city for years to come. So please take note of the project's website link and email address in the chat box to stay engaged. And we look forward to seeing you again as the work on the project continues to progress. Thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate all of your input.